The morning sun of Kepler, 442b, cast long shadows across the crystal formations that jutted from the planet's surface like frozen lightning. Zara-chun sat cross-legged on her favorite perch, a smooth outcropping of purple stone that overlooked the vast valley where she and her dragon mother made their home. At 8 years old, she was small even by human standards, with dark hair that caught the alien sunlight and eyes that held an intelligence far beyond her years. "Mama Thess, can you tell me again about the day you found me?" Zara asked, her voice carrying the slight accent that came from learning human speech from someone whose vocal cords weren't designed for it. Thessarian raised her massive head from where she had been sunning herself on the valley floor below. Even lying down, the dragon stood nearly 30 feet tall, her scales shifting from deep emerald to brilliant gold, depending on how the light struck them. Each scale was the size of Zara's hand, and they rippled like liquid metal when she moved. Her eyes, ancient and knowing, focused on the small figure above her with the same tender expression a human mother might give her sleeping child. "Again, little spark?" Thessarian's voice resonated through the air, not spoken aloud, but communicated through the telepathic bond they shared. It was an ability common to her species, though using it with a human was unprecedented. "You have heard this story 100 times. But I like hearing it," Zara replied, swinging her legs over the edge of the stone. "Besides, I want to remember every detail. Someday, I might need to tell it to someone else." The dragon's great chest rumbled with what might have been laughter. After 5 years together, she had learned to appreciate the human tendency towards sentimentality, even if she didn't fully understand it. Her species, the Thessari, were not generally known for their emotional attachments. They were apex predators, creatures of intellect and instinct who lived solitary lives spanning thousands of years. The idea of adopting another species' offspring would have been considered madness by any other member of her kind. But then, none of them had ever encountered a human child. Very well. Thessarian settled herself more comfortably, her massive form creating shadows that danced across the crystal formations. It was during the War of the Crimson Nebula, when the Zethkari had pushed deep into Thessari space. I was returning from a scouting mission, my ship damaged and my fuel running low, when I detected a distress beacon from a small human vessel. Zara nodded along, even though she knew every word that was coming. She loved this part of the story, loved imagining her fierce dragon mother as a space pilot, navigating between the stars and ships designed for beings 3 times larger than any human. "The humans had been fleeing from a Zethkari raid," Thessarian continued. "Their ship was dying, life support failing, and when I boarded to offer assistance, I found them all dead from oxygen deprivation. All except for one tiny human child, barely 3 years old, who had somehow survived in an emergency pod designed for adult humans. And I was crying," Zara added, grinning. "You were crying," Thessarian confirmed, and Zara could feel the warmth of the memory through their bond. Such a small, pathetic creature, making more noise than a wounded thorn beast. "By all logic, I should have left you for the authorities to handle. My kind does not involve itself in the affairs of other species, especially not in caring for their young. But you didn't leave me." "No." The dragon's mental voice grew softer. "I cannot. There was something about your cries, little spark. They reached into a part of my mind I had never accessed before, triggered instincts I did not know I possessed. When I picked you up, you stopped crying and reached for my face with those impossibly small hands. You showed no fear of me, no recognition that I was a predator capable of ending your life without effort." Zara had heard this story so many times, but it never got old. She loved the way her dragon mother's mental voice changed when she talked about that first meeting, how it became gentle and wondering, as if she still couldn't quite believe what had happened. "And then?" Zara prompted. "And then you did something that changed the course of both our lives. You said your first word to me. Manga. Mama," Thessarian confirmed. A human concept that had no direct translation in my language, yet somehow I understood it perfectly. In that moment, looking down at this tiny, helpless creature who had claimed me as her mother, I made a decision that defied every instinct of my species. "I took you home." Zara smiled and leaned back on her hands, feeling the warm stone beneath her palms. This was her favorite part, not just of the story, but of her entire life. This moment, sitting in the alien sunshine with her dragon mother, feeling completely safe and completely loved. The other Thessari thought you had lost your mind, she said, continuing the familiar narrative. The other Thessari still think I have lost my mind, Thessarian replied with amusement. Dragons do not adopt alien children. We do not form emotional attachments. We do not spend our time teaching young humans to hunt crystal mice or how to ride the thermal currents in the upper atmosphere. But you do all those things with me. Yes, little Spark, I do all those things with you. Zara stretched and stood up, preparing to climb down from her perch. She had promised to help Thessarian check the sensor array that morning, and the afternoon was reserved for her flight training. At 8 years old, she was already one of the most accomplished pilots in the sector, though few people knew it. Thessarian had taught her to fly almost before she could walk, and their bond allowed them to share sensory input and reflexes in a way that made them devastating in combat. Not that they engaged in combat very often. They lived a peaceful life here on the edge of civilized space, far from the political machinations and territorial disputes that plague the galaxy's major powers. Thessarian hunted for their food, maintained a small outpost that served as their home, and continued Zara's education in everything from astrophysics to xenobiology. Zara helped with maintenance work, practiced her piloting skills, and studied the various alien languages that Thessarian had taught her. It was a good life, a quiet life, and if sometimes Zara wondered what it would be like to meet other humans, she didn't dwell on it. Thessarian was her mother in every way that mattered, and this remote outpost was the only home she had ever known. She was halfway down the crystal formation when the first alarm sounded. The sound was unlike anything in their normal routine, a harsh, discordant wailing that made Zara's teeth ache. She had never heard it before, but somehow she knew instinctively what it meant. Thessarian had programmed that particular alarm for only one purpose: incoming ships with hostile intent. Mangatis, Zara called out, but the dragon was already moving, her massive form rising from the valley floor with surprising grace. Get to the safe room, little Spark. Thessarian's mental voice was sharp now, all traces of gentle affection replaced by the cold focus of a predator. Now, Zara didn't argue. She had been drilled on emergency procedures since she was old enough to walk. She slid the rest of the way down the crystal formation and sprinted toward their home, a structure built into the side of a cliff that provided both concealment and defensive advantages. The safe room was deep underground, accessible only through a hidden entrance that would be nearly impossible to find without detailed knowledge of the outpost's layout. It contained enough supplies to last for weeks, along with a communication system that could reach human space if necessary. Thessarian had built it shortly after bringing Zara home, when she realized that caring for a human child came with dangers she had never had to consider before. As Zara reached the entrance to their home, she could hear the sound of atmospheric entry high above. Multiple ships flying in formation, moving too fast and too aggressively to be anything friendly. She paused at the threshold, looking back toward the valley where Thessarian was preparing for whatever was coming. Her dragon mother had changed, transformed from the gentle, patient creature who told bedtime stories and taught flying lessons into something altogether more frightening. Her scales had darkened to a deep, warning red, and her massive wings were spread wide in a threat display that spoke to instincts older than civilization. She looked every inch the apex predator she was, a creature capable of taking on entire fleets if necessary. Zara, the mental voice cracked like a whip. Safe room. Now, Zara ran. The safe room sealed itself behind her with a soft hiss of pressurizing air. The walls were lined with monitors that showed various views of the surrounding area, and Zara quickly activated them, her small hands dancing over controls that Thessarian had modified for human use. Outside, 6 ships were landing in the valley, their hulls bearing the distinctive crimson and gold markings of the Draconian Empire. Zara's blood went cold. She had learned about the Draconians in her studies, had seen recordings of their raids and conquests. They were slavers and pirates, a species that had built an empire on the suffering of others. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they couldn't use, and they had a particular fondness for capturing rare and valuable creatures. Creatures like Thessarian. On the monitors, Zara watched as armored figures emerged from the ships. They moved with military precision, spreading out in a pattern designed to surround and contain a target. Their weapons were drawn, and she could see the distinctive shimmer of energy shields around their forms. But it was their leader that made Zara's heart stop. Draconians were reptilian, but this one was different. Larger than the others, with scales that had been artificially enhanced with cybernetic implants. Scars covered his face and arms, trophies from battles fought across the galaxy. This was Vextar the Collector, one of the most feared raiders in Draconian space. Thessarian stepped into view, placing herself between the invaders and the cliff where Zara was hidden. Even faced with 6 ships' worth of armed soldiers, the dragon showed no fear. Her mental voice reached Zara through their bond, calm and reassuring despite the circumstances. Stay hidden, little spark. No matter what happens, you stay hidden until they leave. Mama Thess, there are too many of them, Zara whispered, knowing the dragon could hear her thoughts even if she couldn't respond without giving away Zara's location. I have faced worse odds, Thessarian replied, and Zara felt a flash of memories through their connection. Battles in space, dogfights between the stars, the fury of a dragon unleashed in defense of her territory. I'm not some helpless creature they can simply collect. Vextar stepped forward, his augmented voice carrying easily across the valley. Thessarian of the Third Nest, you are in violation of Draconian territorial claims. This system now falls under the authority of the Empire, and all residents are subject to Imperial law. Thessarian's response was a sound that had no human equivalent, a mixture of roar and psychic scream that made several of the soldiers step backward. When she spoke, her voice was projected through the air rather than telepathically, each word dripping with contempt. This system is unclaimed and unoccupied Draconian. Your empire has no authority here. Authority is what we make it, Vextar replied, and Zara could hear the amusement in his voice. And I have decided that this system is now ours, as are its inhabitants. I'm not some prize to be collected. Oh, but you are. Vextar's smile was visible even through his helmet. Do you know how much a live Thessari dragon sells for in the gladiatorial arenas? Especially one with your reputation. The war hero who vanished 5 years ago. The dragon who turned her back on glory to live in exile. The crowds will pay fortunes to see you fight. Zara felt Thessarian's rage spike through their bond, a wave of fury so intense it made her gasp. But underneath the anger was something else, something that made her stomach clench with fear. Uncertainty. Thessarian was outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting to protect not just herself, but the hidden child who depended on her. The first shot came without warning, a stun blast designed to incapacitate rather than kill. Thessarian moved like liquid lightning, her massive form seeming to flow around the energy beam. Her response was immediate and devastating, a bolt of plasma that vaporized the soldier who had fired and left a crater in the ground where he had been standing. The battle that followed was like nothing Zara had ever seen, even in the war documentaries she studied. Thessarian moved with a grace that belied her size, her wings creating whirlwinds that knocked soldiers off their feet while her claws and teeth found gaps in armor with surgical precision. She was magnificent and terrible, a force of nature given form and purpose. But there were too many of them, and they had come prepared. Nets made of energy began to deploy from their ships, fields that disrupted Thessarian's flight and tangled around her limbs. Stun weapons fired in coordinated volleys, each blast wearing down her natural resistances. Zara watched in horror as her dragon mother began to slow, her movements becoming sluggish as the multiple stun effects took their toll. Still she fought, her mental voice reaching out to Zara with desperate love. Do not reveal yourself, little spark. Promise me, no matter what happens, do not reveal yourself. Mama Thess, please. Zara was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she watched the only parent she had ever known being slowly overwhelmed. Promise me. I promise, Zara whispered, the words feeling like glass in her throat. The final energy net settled over Thessarian just as her legs gave out, the massive dragon crashing to the ground with an impact that shook the entire cliff face. She struggled weakly against the restraints, but the multiple stun effects had left her barely conscious. Vextar approached the fallen dragon, his movements casual despite having just witnessed the most impressive display of combat prowess Zara had ever seen. He reached out and touched one of Thessarian's great horns, his voice filled with satisfaction. "Magnificent," he said. "You will make quite the show in the arena." The crowds love a fighter with spirit. Through their fading bond, Zara felt Thessarian gathering the last of her strength for one final message. "I love you, little spark. Remember our stories. Remember that you are my daughter, no matter what blood runs in your veins. Someday, somehow, I will find you again." And then the connection went dark as additional stun charges rendered Thessarian completely unconscious. Zara pressed her face against the monitor, watching as the soldiers loaded her dragon mother into one of their ships. The process took nearly an hour, requiring specialized equipment and the combined effort of dozens of soldiers. Even unconscious, Thessarian was a formidable presence, her scales still flickering with residual energy discharges. As the ships prepared to leave, Vextar paused and looked around the valley, his enhanced senses scanning for anything his soldiers might have missed. "Sir, should we search the installation?" one of his subordinates asked. "No," Vextar replied after a moment. If there was anything of value here, the dragon would have been guarding it more actively. She fought like a creature protecting territory, not treasure. The ships lifted off one by one, their engines scarring the crystal formations with superheated exhaust. Zara watched until they disappeared into the afternoon sky, taking her world with them. For a long time after they were gone, she sat in the safe room and cried. Great, wrenching sobs that seemed to tear something vital from her chest. She was alone now, truly alone, on a planet at the edge of known space with no way to contact anyone who might help. But as the hours passed and the tears finally stopped, something else began to grow in the empty space where her heart had been. Something cold and hard and infinitely patient. They had taken her mother. They had taken the only family she had ever known, the creature who had raised her and loved her and taught her everything she knew about the universe. But they had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They had assumed that because Thessarian lived in exile, she lived alone. They had no idea that for the past 5 years, a Thessari dragon had been teaching a human child not just how to fly and fight, but how to think like a predator. Zara Chun was 8 years old, alone on an alien world, with no weapons except her training and no allies except her memories. It would have to be enough, because somewhere out there, probably being transported to a gladiatorial arena in the heart of draconian space, Mama Thess was counting on her daughter to remember the lesson she had taught. And the first lesson had always been the same: never give up on family. 3 days after the Draconians took Thessarian, Zara emerged from the safe room with a plan that would have terrified any adult who understood its implications. In her small hands, she carried a data pad containing everything she had been able to piece together about Draconian slave routes, gladiatorial circuits, and the location of their primary holding facilities. Her young face was set in lines too hard for someone her age, eyes that had seen too much and understood more than they should. The outpost felt impossibly empty without Thessarian's massive presence. Every shadow seemed wrong, every sound too quiet. Zara had spent the first day after the attack simply wandering through their home, touching things that her dragon mother had handled, breathing in air that still carried traces of her unique scent. But grief was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not when Mama Thess was somewhere out there, probably being tortured or conditioned for the arena. The communication array had been damaged during the attack, but not destroyed. Zara spent the second day repairing it, her small fingers working with the precision that came from years of helping Thessarian maintain their equipment. The work was complicated, requiring her to splice together systems that hadn't been designed to interface with each other, but she had learned electronics from one of the most technically proficient species in the galaxy. Now, standing before the rebuilt transmitter, she prepared to send a message that would change everything. Not to human authorities who would take too long to act and might not even believe her story. Not to the Thessari, who would consider her an alien aberration not worth their time. Instead, she was reaching out to the one group of humans who would understand exactly what the Draconians had done and why it couldn't be allowed to stand. She was calling the Freelancers. The Freelancers were officially an independent merchant guild, a loose confederation of traitors and pilots who operated in the gray zones between established governments. Unofficially, they were the closest thing humanity had to a military force that wasn't bound by political considerations. They were explorers and fighters, refugees and rebels, bound together by a shared code that put human life above profit and family above everything else. Most importantly, they had a reputation for responding to certain kinds of distress calls with overwhelming force and absolute dedication. The kind of calls that involve humans in danger, especially human children. Zara activated the transmitter and began to speak, her young voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. This is Zara Chun, human child, age 8, transmitting from coordinates 77 Mark Delta 4 in the Kepler 442 system. 3 days ago, Draconian raiders under the command of Vextar, the Collector, attacked our home and captured my adoptive mother, a Thessari dragon named Thessarian. I am requesting immediate assistance under Article 7 of the Human Protection Protocols. She paused, knowing that what came next would either seal her fate or doom her to failure. Article 7 was real, but it was also one of the most closely guarded secrets in human space. It was the nuclear option, the thing that turned the freelancers from merchants into something altogether more dangerous. Authorization code. The children cry for their parents, and the stars themselves weep in response. The code was one that Thessarian had taught her years ago, back when she was too young to understand its significance. Her dragon mother had learned it during the war, when she had fought alongside human forces and witnessed firsthand what happened when someone threatened a human family. She had made Zara memorize it, along with dozens of other pieces of information that might someday prove useful. I know who took her and where they're likely taking her. I have intelligence on Draconian slaving operations and gladiatorial circuits. I'm trained in combat piloting and xenobiology. I could be useful to a rescue operation, but I need extraction from my current location and transport to wherever you're staging from. Another pause, and when Zara spoke again, her voice carried an edge that would have been frightening in an adult, let alone a child. They hurt my dragon mom. She's been taking care of me since I was 3 years old. She's the only family I have, and I'm the only family she has. Please help me get her back. The message transmission took nearly 2 hours, boosted and repeated through a dozen relay stations to ensure it reached its intended recipients. Then, Zara settled down to wait, checking and rechecking her equipment while monitoring local space for any signs of incoming ships. The response came 18 hours later, and it wasn't what she had expected. Zara Chun, this is Captain Maria Santos of the freelancer vessel Storm Chaser. We have received your transmission and verified your authorization code. A rescue fleet is being assembled as we speak, but there are complications you need to be aware of. Zara felt her heart leap. They were coming. The freelancers were actually coming to help her. The intelligence you mentioned is correct, Captain Santos continued. Thessarian has been transported to the gladiatorial complex on Draconia Prime, the capital world of their empire. This is not a simple rescue operation. We're talking about infiltrating the most heavily defended system in Draconian space to extract a single prisoner from a facility that was designed to hold the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. The message paused, and when it resumed, Zara could hear the smile in the captain's voice. Under normal circumstances, we would tell you this mission is impossible and recommend diplomatic channels. But you invoked Article 7, and that changes everything. When a human child asks for help getting their family back, we don't calculate odds. We calculate how many ships we need to bring. Zara found herself crying again, but these were different tears. Relief and hope and a desperate gratitude that she wasn't alone anymore. We're dispatching a fast courier to pick you up. ETA is 72 hours. Start packing everything you think might be useful and download all the intelligence you've gathered. Also, Zara, you should know that word of your situation has already spread through the freelancer network. Every human pilot within 50 light years is volunteering for this mission. Some of them are coming from much further than that. The transmission ended, and Zara stared at the communicator for a long moment, trying to process what she had just heard. She had hoped for a single ship, maybe a small team of specialists who could infiltrate the gladiatorial complex and extract Thessarian quietly. Instead, it sounded like the freelancers were preparing for war. Over the next 3 days, while she waited for pickup, Zara threw herself into preparation with the same methodical intensity that Thessarian had taught her to apply to everything. She packaged up every piece of intelligence she had gathered about draconian operations, copied every technical manual and star chart that might prove useful, and selected the personal items she couldn't bear to leave behind. Most importantly, she recorded everything she could remember about Thessarian. Not just the tactical information that might help with a rescue, but the personal details that made her dragon mother unique. Her favorite places to sun herself, the way she hummed when she was content, the telepathic harmonics that were as distinctive as a fingerprint. Because there was always the possibility that the rescue would fail, and Zara wanted to make sure that someone, somewhere, would remember who Thessarian really was. The freelancer courier arrived exactly on schedule, materializing out of hyperspace with the kind of precision that spoke to exceptional piloting skills. It was a sleek, fast ship designed for stealth and speed rather than comfort, and its pilot was exactly what Zara had expected from the reputation she had heard. Captain Elena Vasquez was a compact woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much but somehow retained their warmth. She wore the practical flight suit of a career pilot, and her movements carried the unconscious competence of someone who had been flying between the stars for most of her adult life. "Zara-chun?" she asked, stepping out of her ship with a smile that managed to be both professional and genuinely kind. "Yes, ma'am," Zara replied, shouldering her pack. "Thank you for coming." "Thank Captain Santos for putting together the rescue operation," Vasquez said, looking around the outpost with professional interest. "I'm just here to give you a ride. Though I have to say, this is an impressive setup. Your dragon mother taught you well." "She taught me everything," Zara said simply, and something in her tone made the pilot's expression soften. "We're going to get her back," Vasquez said, and there was a certainty in her voice that spoke to more than just professional confidence. "I know it probably doesn't feel like it right now, but you did the right thing calling us. What the Draconians did, taking someone's family, that's not something we let stand." The flight to the freelancer staging area took 4 days, during which Zara learned more about human military capabilities than most civilians knew existed. Captain Vasquez was happy to explain the basics of freelancer organization and tactics, partly to keep Zara's mind off her worry about Thessarian, and partly because she was genuinely impressed by the child's technical knowledge and strategic thinking. Most people don't realize that the freelancers aren't just merchants, Vasquez explained as they sat in the small ship's common area, sharing a meal of military rations that somehow tasted better than they had any right to. "We're the descendants of the colony ships that left Earth during the early expansion period. Our ancestors were explorers and pioneers, people who were willing to risk everything to build new lives among the stars." "But you fight," Zara observed. "The stories I've heard make it sound like you're warriors." "We fight when we have to," Vasquez confirmed. "Space is dangerous, and there are a lot of species out there who see humans as weak because we're small and don't have natural weapons like claws or armored skin. They forget that humans are tool users, and our most dangerous tool is each other." She leaned forward, her expression growing serious. "What you need to understand, Zara, is that family is sacred to humans in a way that other species don't always comprehend. We form bonds that transcend genetics, adopt children from different species, and consider anyone who shares our values to be part of our tribe. When someone threatens our family, they're not just attacking individuals. They're attacking the fundamental principle that holds human civilization together." "Is that why so many people are volunteering for the rescue?" Zara asked. "That's exactly why," Vasquez smiled. "You're 8 years old, you've lost your mother, and you asked for help. Every human who hears that story is going to have the same basic reaction. Whatever it takes, we get the kid's mom back." The staging area turned out to be a massive space station hidden in the shadow of a gas giant, far from any established shipping lanes. It was a freelancer stronghold, a place where the scattered ships of the merchant fleet could gather for major operations or simply to trade stories and supplies. Zara had never seen so many human ships in one place. Frigates and destroyers hung in formation alongside converted freighters and sleek courier vessels. There were ships she recognized from her studies and others that looked like nothing she had ever seen before, experimental designs, and one-off custom builds that reflected the individual personalities of their crews. "How many ships are there?" she asked as their shuttle approached the docking bay. "Last count, about 200, Vasquez replied. "More arriving every hour. Word has spread through the entire freelancer network, and people are coming from every corner of human space." "That seems like a lot for one rescue mission." Vasquez was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried undertones that Zara didn't fully understand. "Zara, what do you know about the history between humans and Draconians?" "Not much," Zara admitted. "Thessarian taught me that they're slavers and raiders, and that they've been expanding their territory for the past few centuries. She said they were brutal but predictable." "She was right about the brutal part," Vasquez said grimly. "But there's more to it than that. About 15 years ago, the Draconians raided a human colony called New Terra. It was a peaceful agricultural world, no military significance, just families trying to build a new life." Zara felt her stomach clench. She had a feeling she knew where this story was going. "They took everyone," Vasquez continued. "Every man, woman, and child on the planet. Sold them into slavery or fed them to their gladiatorial arenas. When the freelancers responded, the Draconians claimed it was a legitimate military action, that the colony had been established in territory they considered theirs." "What happened?" "We went to war," Vasquez said simply. "Not officially, because the Earth government didn't want to risk a full-scale conflict with the Draconian Empire. But the freelancers? We made it very clear that attacking human civilians would have consequences." She gestured toward the assembled fleet visible through the shuttle's windows. "It took us 3 years to find and liberate every single person who had been taken from New Terra. We hit Draconian slave markets, gladiatorial complexes, and private collections throughout their empire. By the time we were done, they had learned to avoid human targets." "Until now," Zara said quietly. "Until now," Vasquez agreed. "They probably thought that taking a single dragon from an isolated outpost wouldn't attract our attention. They had no idea that the dragon had a human daughter." The shuttle docked with a soft thump, and Vasquez stood up, checking her gear with the automatic precision of a career pilot. "Come on, kid. Time to meet the people who are going to help us get your mom back." The space station was bustling with activity, corridors filled with humans of every description preparing for what was clearly going to be a major military operation. Zara saw weapons being distributed, ships being retrofitted for combat, and tactical displays showing the approaches to Draconia Prime. But it was the people that impressed her most. These weren't soldiers in the traditional sense, but merchants and explorers, families and outcasts who had chosen to make their lives in the dangerous freedom of deep space. They moved with the easy confidence of people who had faced down pirates and alien predators, who had learned to rely on each other in situations where help was always days or weeks away. And every single one of them, when they saw her, offered the same thing: a smile, a word of encouragement, and an absolute promise that they would bring Thessarian home. Captain Santos was waiting for them in the station's command center, a tall woman with graying brown hair and the kind of calm authority that came from years of making life and death decisions. She was standing in front of a massive holographic display showing the Draconian capital system, surrounded by other officers who were studying approach vectors and defensive positions. "Zara-chun," she said, turning as they approached. "I'm glad you made it safely. I hope Captain Vasquez explained the scope of what we're undertaking here." "She told me about New Terra," Zara said, "and about why so many people are willing to help." "Good," Santos nodded approvingly. "Because I want you to understand exactly what you've set in motion by invoking Article 7. This isn't just a rescue mission anymore. It's a statement. We're telling the galaxy that humans protect their families, regardless of species, regardless of politics, and regardless of the odds against success." She gestured to the tactical display, where Draconia Prime hung in space like a malevolent red eye surrounded by defensive installations and patrol fleets. "The gladiatorial complex where they're holding Thessarian is here." She pointed to a structure on the planet's surface that looked like a massive arena surrounded by holding facilities. "It's heavily fortified, designed to contain creatures that could level cities if they escaped. Getting inside won't be the hard part. Getting out alive will be." "What's the plan?" Zara asked, studying the display with the tactical awareness that Thessarian had drilled into her from an early age. We're still working on the details, Santos admitted. But the basic strategy is straightforward. Create enough chaos in the outer system to draw off most of their defensive forces. Then punch a hole through their remaining defenses and extract your mother before they can organize a response. That sounds incredibly dangerous. It is, Santos agreed, which is why you're staying on the station during the actual operation. Zara felt her heart stop. What? No, you can't leave me behind. I can help. I know things about Thessarian that could be important, and I'm a trained pilot. You can get yourself killed, Santos interrupted, but not unkindly. Zara, I understand why you want to be part of this. If it were my mother in that arena, I'd feel the same way. But you're 8 years old, and this is going to be the most dangerous military operation the freelancers have attempted in over a decade. However, Santos continued, holding up a hand to forestall further argument, there might be a role for you in the intelligence gathering phase. We need to know more about the facility's layout, guard rotations, and security protocols. And we need to understand Thessarian's current condition and capabilities. Zara felt a spark of hope. You mean reconnaissance? I mean exactly that, Santos smiled. But only if you can prove you're up to it. Captain Vasquez tells me you're an exceptional pilot for your age, and your technical knowledge is impressive. But this would require skills you might not have learned yet. Try me, Zara said immediately. Santos looked at her for a long moment, then nodded to one of her subordinates. Get her set up with the simulation programs. Full spectrum intelligence gathering scenarios. If she can handle the training, we'll discuss including her in the preliminary operations. As Zara was led away to begin her testing, she caught Santos speaking quietly to Vasquez. Think she's ready for something like this? I think she's been ready since the moment they took her dragon mother, Vasquez replied. The question isn't whether she can handle it. The question is whether we can handle what she'll become if we don't let her help. Looking back at the tactical display, showing Draconia Prime, Zara felt the cold determination that had been growing in her chest crystallize into something harder and sharper. They were going to test her, evaluate her, decide whether she was worthy of helping in her own mother's rescue. She would show them exactly what a human child raised by a dragon was capable of. And then they would go get Mama Thess back. The simulation chamber was unlike anything Zara had ever experienced. A spherical room lined with holographic projectors that could recreate any environment with perfect fidelity. As she settled into the pilot's chair at the center of the chamber, she felt the familiar weight of flight controls under her hands and the comforting embrace of a pilot's harness across her chest. First test is basic infiltration, announced Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, the freelancer intelligence specialist who was running her evaluation. He was a lean, sharp-eyed man who reminded Zara of the hawks that nested in the crystal formations back home. You need to get close enough to a Draconian patrol vessel to plant a surveillance device without being detected. Standard stealth protocols, military-grade sensors, and if you're caught, the mission ends. The chamber around Zara dissolved into the star-filled darkness of space, with the massive bulk of a Draconian destroyer hanging motionless before her. Her ship for this simulation was a small reconnaissance craft, built for stealth rather than speed or firepower. She could see the enemy vessel's sensor arrays sweeping space in regular patterns, searching for exactly the kind of infiltration she was attempting. Beginning approach, Zara announced, her hands moving over the controls with the fluid precision that came from years of training with Thessarian. Her dragon mother had taught her to fly the way most children learn to walk, through constant practice and intuitive understanding rather than formal instruction. The key to stealth flying, Thessarian had always said, was thinking like prey. Predators expected their targets to run in straight lines, to make noise, to panic when discovered. But prey animals survived by being patient, by moving when their hunters weren't looking, by understanding their environment well enough to use it for concealment. Zara watched the sensor sweeps carefully, timing her approach to coincide with the gaps between search patterns. She used the destroyer's own bulk as concealment, sliding along its blind spots while matching its rotation to stay in the sensor shadows. When she finally planted the surveillance device on the ship's hull, she had been undetected for the entire 20-minute operation. Excellent, Morrison said as the simulation ended. That was flawless execution. Most of our pilots take 3 or 4 attempts to complete that scenario without being caught. Thessarian taught me that stealth is about patience, Zara explained. You wait for the right moment instead of trying to create it. Smart dragon, Morrison replied, making notes on his data pad. Next test, information extraction. You've been captured by Draconian security and are being interrogated. Your mission is to gather intelligence about the facility while giving up as little useful information as possible about your own operations. The simulation shifted, and Zara found herself in a sterile interrogation room, facing a holographic Draconian officer. The alien was tall and imposing, with scales that shifted from green to red, depending on his emotional state, and eyes that glowed with predatory intelligence. State your name and purpose, the Draconian demanded, his voice carrying the slight, sibilant accent of a species. My name is Zara, she replied truthfully. I'm looking for my mother. Your mother? They took her, Zara said, allowing real emotion to creep into her voice. It wasn't hard. The pain of Thessarian's capture was still fresh, a constant ache in her chest that colored everything she did. The slavers took her, and I want her back. The interrogator's scales shifted toward a more sympathetic green. Draconians, for all their reputation as brutal raiders, had strong family bonds within their own species. The sight of a distressed child searching for her parent was something that resonated even with them. Describe this mother, the interrogator said, his tone becoming less aggressive. She's big and beautiful, with scales that change color in the sunlight, Zara said, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. She taught me to fly and told me stories and made me feel safe. Please, I just want to know if she's okay. As the interrogation continued, Zara played her role perfectly. She was just a lost child, separated from her family, and desperate for information. She asked questions about the facility's layout under the guise of wanting to know where different types of prisoners were kept. She inquired about feeding schedules and exercise periods because she was worried about her mother's health. She even managed to learn about guard rotations by expressing concern about which personnel might be kind enough to pass along a message. By the time the simulation ended, she had gathered more intelligence about the fictional facility than the interrogator had extracted about her mission. Remarkable, Morrison said, shaking his head in amazement. You played that perfectly. The emotional manipulation, the way you use their own psychological vulnerabilities against them. Where did you learn techniques like that? I didn't learn them, Zara said quietly. I just told the truth about how I feel. Sometimes the best way to lie is to only tell the parts of the truth that help you. Morrison stared at her for a long moment, then made more notes on his pad. Final test. Combat piloting. You're flying escort for extraction team when you encounter superior enemy forces. Your objective is to protect the transport while ensuring your own survival. The simulation chamber became a chaotic battlefield, with Draconian fighters swarming around a slow-moving transport ship that was trying to reach the safety of a hyperspace jump point. Zara's fighter was fast and maneuverable, but outnumbered 3-1 and outgunned by an even larger margin. This was the test she had been dreading. Not because she wasn't confident in her piloting skills, but because she knew that combat flying was where her unconventional training would be most apparent. Thessarian hadn't taught her to fly like a human pilot. She had taught her to fly like a dragon. The first Draconian fighter came at her head-on, probably expecting her to break away from the collision course at the last moment. Instead, Zara accelerated directly toward it, firing at point-blank range before rolling her ship in a maneuver that no human pilot would have attempted. The enemy fighter exploded, its debris field providing temporary concealment as she engaged the next target. Her fighting style was unlike anything in standard human tactical doctrine, where human pilots relied on formation flying and coordinated attacks. Zara fought like a solitary predator. She used the chaos of battle as camouflage, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing into debris fields or energy discharges before her enemies could respond. Most importantly, she never forgot her primary objective. Even as she engaged enemy fighters, she kept the transport ship position between herself and the most dangerous threats, using her own fighter as a mobile shield to protect the larger vessel. When the simulation ended with the transport safely reaching its jump point and 2/3 of the enemy fighters destroyed, Morrison was staring at his readouts with an expression of disbelief. What the hell was that? He demanded. That wasn't human combat doctrine. Those maneuvers shouldn't be possible with human reflexes. I don't have human reflexes, Zara said simply. Not entirely. Thessarian and I share a psychic bond. When she taught me to fly, I learned to think the way she thinks, react the way she reacts. I'm not flying like a human pilot, because I'm not just human anymore. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of what she had just told him. Finally, he set down his datapad and looked at her with a mixture of respect and concern. Zara, what you just demonstrated, it's incredible. Your infiltration skills are better than most of our senior intelligence operatives. Your piloting abilities are unlike anything I've ever seen. And your capacity for information gathering under pressure is remarkable. But Zara could hear the hesitation in his voice. But you're also 8 years old, and what you're asking us to let you do could get you killed, Morrison said bluntly. Those abilities you've developed, they come from a bond with a creature that's been your partner and protector your entire conscious life. Without that bond, without that backup, you're still just a child in a very dangerous situation. I know the risks, Zara said, but Thessarian is counting on me. She's alone in that arena, probably being tortured or conditioned for combat, and she doesn't know if anyone is coming for her. If I can get close enough to re-establish our bond, even briefly, I can let her know that help is coming. And if you get caught, if something goes wrong, and you end up in a draconian prison cell next to her, Zara met his gaze steadily. Then, at least we'll be together. Morrison sighed and picked up his datapad again. I'll pass your results on to Captain Santos. The decision about whether to include you in the operation will be hers. An hour later, Zara found herself back in the command center, standing before Santos and the other senior officers while they reviewed Morrison's evaluation. The tactical display still showed Draconia Prime, but now was overlaid with detailed intelligence about the gladiatorial complex and its defenses. Your performance in the simulations was exceptional, Santos said without preamble. Lieutenant Commander Morrison says you demonstrated skills that would be impressive in a veteran operative, let alone a child. Thank you, Zara replied. However, Santos continued, the mission we're planning is not a simulation. The dangers are real, the enemy is real, and the consequences of failure could be catastrophic not just for you, but for every member of the rescue force. Zara remained silent, sensing that Santos was working through her own thoughts about the situation. On the other hand, the captain said, you're the only person in this fleet who has a psychic connection with our target. If Thessarian has been drugged or conditioned, that bond might be the only way to reach her. And your unique skill set could be invaluable for certain aspects of the operation. Santos stood up and walked over to the tactical display, studying the layout of the gladiatorial complex. We've been planning a direct assault, overwhelming force applied at the point of maximum vulnerability. But your test results suggest a different approach might be possible. What kind of approach? Zara asked. Infiltration, Santos said. Instead of fighting our way in, we find a way to get you inside the complex as a prisoner. You re-establish contact with Thessarian, gather intelligence on the internal security systems, and create a window for the extraction team to get both of you out. Zara felt her heart racing. It was a dangerous plan, one that relied on her ability to maintain her cover while surrounded by enemies. But it was also exactly the kind of mission her training with Thessarian had prepared her for. I can do it, she said. I believe you can, Santos agreed. But I want you to understand exactly what you'd be volunteering for. You would be completely on your own inside that complex, with no backup and no way to call for help if things go wrong. Your survival would depend entirely on your own abilities and the hope that we can reach you before your cover is blown. I understand. Santos studied her for a long moment, then nodded to herself. Very well. If you're willing to take the risk, we're willing to let you try. But there are conditions. What conditions? First, you follow orders without question. If an extraction team member tells you to do something, you do it immediately and without argument. Second, if the operation is compromised, getting you out alive becomes the primary objective, even if it means leaving Thessarian behind. Zara started to protest, but Santos held up a hand. I know you don't like that condition, but it's non-negotiable. We are not going to let a human child die in a draconian prison, regardless of the circumstances. Your dragon mother would never forgive us, and we'd never forgive ourselves. What's the third condition? You start calling her Thessarian instead of Mama Thess, Santos said with a slight smile. If you're going to be part of a military operation, you need to start thinking like a soldier instead of a scared child. Zara nodded, understanding the psychology behind the request. The emotional distance would help her maintain her cover and make the hard decisions that might be necessary during the mission. When do we leave? She asked. The fleet departs in 6 hours, Santos replied. But your insertion won't happen until we're in the Draconian system. We need to make it look like you were captured during the initial assault, which means you'll be going in while the battle is still raging. Over the next few hours, Zara threw herself into mission preparation with the same intensity she had once applied to learning Thessarian's lessons. She memorized deck plans and security protocols, studied Draconian psychology and cultural practices, and practiced the cover story that would hopefully keep her alive long enough to complete her objectives. The story was simple. She was a human child who had been traveling with an independent merchant when a freelancer fleet attacked. Her ship had been destroyed, and she had been captured while trying to escape in a life pod. She was scared, confused, and desperate to find any family members who might have survived the battle. It was a story that contained enough truth to be believable while concealing her real purpose and capabilities. Most importantly, it positioned her as a victim rather than a threat, someone who might be valuable as a slave or arena fighter, but who wasn't dangerous enough to require special security measures. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Zara found herself standing in the observation deck, watching the stars through the transparent aluminum windows. In a few hours, they would be in Draconian space, beginning an operation that would either reunite her with her dragon mother or see them both dead in an alien arena. Having second thoughts? Captain Vasquez asked, joining her at the window. No, Zara replied. Just thinking about what Thessarian would say if she knew what I was planning. What would she say? Zara smiled, remembering her dragon mother's voice and the lessons that had shaped her entire worldview. She'd say that family is worth any risk, and that sometimes the smallest hunter can bring down the largest prey if they're patient enough and smart enough. Sounds like a wise dragon. She is, Zara said firmly, and I'm going to prove that her lessons weren't wasted. The stars shifted as the fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying 200 ships and their crews toward a confrontation that would determine the fate of one small family, and sent a message to the entire galaxy about the lengths humans would go to protect their own. In the darkness between stars, Zara Chun prepared to become something that had never existed before, a human child raised by a dragon, trained in the arts of war and stealth, ready to infiltrate the heart of an enemy empire to save the only parent she had ever known. The galaxy was about to learn that making a human child cry was the worst mistake the Draconian Empire had ever made. The Draconia Prime system erupted into chaos at 0347 Standard Galactic Time, when 200 freelancer warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation and immediately opened fire on every military target within sensor range. The attack was sudden, overwhelming, and designed to create exactly the kind of confusion that would make one small infiltration mission possible. Zara watched the beginning of the battle from the bridge of a modified courier ship that had been configured to look like a damaged merchant vessel. Around her, the crew worked with grim efficiency to make their ship appear as helpless as possible while staying close enough to the action to justify their presence in the combat zone. Remember, Captain Santos said through the comm system, "You're a terrified merchant crew trying to escape the battle. When the Draconians capture you, surrender immediately and act like civilians who got caught in the crossfire." "Understood," replied Lieutenant Torres, the ship's pilot. "How long do we need to maintain the deception?" "Long enough for Zara to be processed through their prisoner intake system and assigned to the gladiatorial complex," Santos said. "After that, you're authorized to break cover and extract yourselves however you can." Zara checked her equipment one final time. She carried nothing that would identify her as anything other than a frightened child. Simple clothing, a small bag of personal items, and a hidden communication device disguised as a toy that would let her contact the extraction team when the time was right. More importantly, she carried the psychic training that the Thessarian had given her, the ability to sense emotions and project thoughts that might be the key to re-establishing contact with her dragon mother. Enemy patrol approaching, Torres announced. 3 Draconian corvettes, moving to intercept. Through the bridge viewports, Zara could see the enemy ships approaching, their hulls gleaming crimson in the light of the system's star. They moved with the predatory grace of natural hunters, closing in on what they believed was easy prey. "This is it," Santos said over the comm. "Zara, remember your cover story and trust your training. We'll be watching for your signal." The courier ship shuddered as Draconian tractor beams locked onto its hull, dragging it toward the largest of the 3 corvettes. Zara felt her heart racing, but forced herself to project the same calm focus that Thessarian had taught her to use in dangerous situations. The boarding action was swift and professional. Draconian Marines in powered armor stormed through the airlock, weapons drawn, and orders barked in their harsh, sibilant language. The courier crew surrendered immediately, dropping to their knees with their hands behind their heads in a universal gesture of submission. "Humans," the boarding party commander said with disgust, switching to accented galactic standard. "What is your purpose in this system?" "We're merchants," Torres replied, his voice shaking with what sounded like genuine terror. "We were just passing through when the battle started. We got caught in the crossfire, and our hyperdrive was damaged." The Draconian officer studied them with cold, reptilian eyes. His gaze lingered on Zara, who was doing her best to look like a frightened child hiding behind the adult crew members. "A child," he said. "What is a human child doing on a merchant vessel?" She's my daughter," Torres improvised. "My wife died last year, and I couldn't leave her anywhere safe. Please, she's just a little girl. She hasn't done anything wrong." The officer's expression shifted slightly, and Zara recognized the same psychological vulnerability she had exploited during her training simulations. Even Draconians, for all their reputation as brutal raiders, had protective instincts toward young creatures. "The child will be processed separately," the officer decided. "If she proves suitable, she may find placement in one of our training facilities." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. Training facilities meant conditioning programs designed to break prisoners and remake them as loyal slaves or gladiator fodder. But it also meant she would be taken to exactly where she needed to go. The transfer to the Draconian processing facility took 6 hours, during which Zara was kept in a holding cell with dozens of other prisoners captured during the ongoing battle. Most were civilian merchants and traders who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, but there were a few who might have been freelancer personnel maintaining deep cover. None of them spoke to her, following the unwritten rule of prison populations everywhere. Keep your head down, don't draw attention, and don't trust anyone until you know whose side they're on. The facility itself was a massive orbital station, designed to handle the enormous volume of prisoners that the Draconian Empire processed every day. Zara was herded through intake procedures with mechanical efficiency, subjected to medical scans, psychological evaluations, and classification interviews that would determine her ultimate fate. "Name?" the Draconian clerk asked, his scaled fingers poised over a data terminal. "Zara Chun," she replied, allowing her voice to shake slightly. "Age, 8 standard years. Family status?" "Orphan," Zara said, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. It wasn't technically true. Thessarian was still alive, still her mother in every way that mattered, but it was what her cover story required. The clerk's expression softened slightly. "Any special skills or training?" "I can fly," Zara said truthfully. My father taught me to pilot small ships before he died." The clerk made notes on his terminal, and Zara caught a glimpse of her classification. Juvenile human female, potential pilot training candidate, suitable for conditioning and arena preparation. Arena preparation. The words sent a spike of hope through her chest. If they were classifying her for the arena, she would be sent to the same facility where Thessarian was being held. The transport to Draconia Prime took another 8 hours, during which Zara was kept in a prisoner transport with 40 other captives destined for various fates within the Draconian Empire. Some would become household slaves, others would be sold to private collectors, and a few would end up in the gladiatorial complex that was their ultimate destination. The complex itself was even larger than the intelligence reports had indicated, a massive structure that sprawled across several square kilometers of the planet's surface. It contained not just the arena where the games were held, but training facilities, holding cells, medical centers, and administrative buildings that supported the entire operation. Zara was processed through yet another intake system, this one specifically designed for potential gladiators. She was assigned a cell number, given basic clothing and equipment, and scheduled for an evaluation that would determine her training regimen. But most importantly, she was finally in the same facility as Thessarian. That night, alone in her small cell, Zara reached out with the psychic abilities her dragon mother had taught her. It was a delicate process, requiring her to project her consciousness through the complex maze of the facility while remaining undetected by any security systems designed to monitor telepathic activity. At first, there was nothing. The facility was huge, containing thousands of prisoners from dozens of different species, and the psychic noise was overwhelming. But Zara had been trained to filter out distractions, to focus on the specific mental signature that belonged to the creature who had raised her. And then, like a beacon in the darkness, she found her. Thessarian's mind was different than she remembered. Clouded, confused, dulled by whatever drugs they had been using to keep her compliant. But underneath the chemical haze, the core of her personality remained unchanged. The fierce intelligence, the protective instincts, the love for the small human child she had adopted 5 years ago. Zara reached out tentatively, not wanting to startle her dragon mother or trigger any monitoring systems that might be watching for unusual mental activity. "Mama Thess," she whispered into the psychic link. "Can you hear me?" The response was immediate and overwhelming. Joy, relief, desperate love, and underneath it all, a fury that made Zara's vision blur red around the edges. "Little spark." Thessarian's mental voice was weak, but unmistakable. "How are you here? This cannot be real. The drugs make me see things that are not there." "I'm real," Zara assured her. "I'm here, in the complex. I came to get you out. Impossible. You are a child, on a planet far from this place. This is another vision, another false hope they use to torment me." "Listen to me," Zara said firmly, projecting the memory of their last conversation, the day Thessarian had been captured. "You told me you loved me. You told me to remember our stories, that I was your daughter no matter what blood ran in my veins. You told me you would find me again." The psychic link flared with recognition and sudden, absolute certainty. "Zara, my little spark, what have you done?" "I called for help," Zara replied. "The freelancers came. There's a fleet in orbit right now, fighting the Draconian Navy. They're going to extract us, but I need to know your condition and location first." Through the link, she felt Thessarian gathering her scattered thoughts, fighting off the effects of whatever chemicals they had been using to keep her docile. "They have been drugging me," her dragon mother confirmed. "Sedatives and neural suppressors, designed to make me compliant for training. But I have been resisting, maintaining my core personality despite their efforts." "Where are you being held?" "Deep underground, in the maximum security section. They rotate me between a holding cell and training chambers, try to condition me for arena combat. The security is extensive, automated systems, armed guards, energy barriers that would be difficult for even a full Thessari to breach." "What about your physical condition?" "Weak but functional. They have been feeding me adequately and providing medical care. They want me healthy for the arena." Thessarian paused, and Zara felt a spike of concern through their link. "Zara, you should not have come here. This place is designed to break the spirits of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. You are a child, and they'll underestimate me," Zara interrupted. "Just like everyone always does. I'm not the same little girl you taught to fly, Mama Thess. I've learned things, developed skills that even you don't know about. And I'm not alone anymore." Over the next few minutes, Zara shared everything she could about the rescue operation, the size of the freelancer fleet, the plan for extraction, and her own role in creating a window for the assault team to reach Thessarian's holding area. "It is too dangerous," Thessarian said when she finished. "If you are discovered, then we'll face whatever comes together," Zara replied. "Just like you taught me. Family doesn't abandon family." She felt her dragon mother's love and pride through the link, along with a resignation that spoke to just how desperate their situation really was. "What do you need me to do?" Thessarian asked. "Stay strong. keep fighting the drugs. And when I give you the signal, be ready to move fast. I will be ready, Thessarian promised. But, Zara, if something goes wrong, if the extraction fails, it won't fail. But if it does, I want you to know that these past 5 years have been the greatest gift of my life. You turned me into something I never thought I could be. You made me a mother. Zara felt tears running down her face, but her mental voice remained steady. You were always a mother, Mama Thess. You just needed someone to love. The psychic connection faded as Zara pulled back, conserving her energy for what was to come. Outside her cell, she could hear the sounds of the facility continuing its grim business. Guards making their rounds, other prisoners being moved for training or medical procedures, the distant roar of crowds watching gladiatorial contests in the arena above. But now she wasn't alone anymore. Thessarian was here, still fighting, still strong despite everything they had done to her. And somewhere in orbit, 200 ships full of humans were preparing to teach the Draconian Empire exactly what happened when someone hurt a human child's family. Zara Chun settled back on her narrow bunk and began to plan. She had been in the facility for less than 24 hours, but she was already gathering intelligence on guard rotations, security protocols, and the layout of the underground levels. Tomorrow, she would begin her own training, playing the role of a frightened child while learning everything she could about the complex's vulnerabilities. And when the time was right, when the extraction team was in position and Thessarian was ready to move, she would show the Draconians exactly what a human child raised by a dragon could do. The galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. A prison break led by an 8-year-old girl who had learned warfare for one of the most dangerous predator species in known space. And it was going to be magnificent. The extraction began at dawn on the 3rd day, when the orbital battle reached its crescendo, and every Draconian, I was focused on the fleet engagement raging in the outer system. Zara had spent the previous 48 hours playing the perfect prisoner, frightened, compliant, and seemingly broken by the reality of her situation. In truth, she had been conducting the most comprehensive intelligence gathering operation of her young life. The facility's routine was rigid and predictable, designed to process thousands of prisoners with mechanical efficiency. Guards changed shifts every 8 hours. Automated systems ran diagnostic cycles every 6 hours, and prisoner movements followed precise schedules that minimized the chance of organized resistance. But the Draconians had made one crucial error in their assessment of their newest captive. They saw a small human child and assumed she was harmless, suitable for basic conditioning and eventual deployment as a minor arena attraction. They had no idea that she had been trained by a species that specialized in patience, observation, and the kind of tactical thinking that turned weaknesses into weapons. Unit 7743, report for evaluation. The automated announcement echoed through Zara's cell block, using the prisoner number she had been assigned. She stood up from her bunk and moved to the cell door with the same resigned compliance she had shown for the past 2 days. The evaluation chamber was a sterile white room containing medical scanners, psychological assessment equipment, and a Draconian technician whose job was to determine each prisoner's optimal conditioning program. Zara had watched dozens of other prisoners go through this process, and she knew exactly what was expected of her. State your designation, the technician ordered without looking up from his data terminal. Unit 7743, Zara replied in a small, frightened voice. Previous occupation? I helped my father on his merchant ship, she said, maintaining the cover story that had gotten her this far. The technician ran her through a series of physical and mental tests, measuring everything from her reflexes to her problem-solving abilities. Zara performed well enough to seem competent, but not so well that she would attract special attention. She was aiming for the middle of the pack, useful enough to be worth training, not valuable enough to warrant additional security. Preliminary assessment, suitable for pilot training and light arena work, the technician concluded. Report to Training Block C tomorrow at 0800 for orientation. Training Block C was perfect. According to the intelligence she had gathered, it was located on the same underground level as the maximum security section where Thessarian was being held. More importantly, the training schedule would give her access to maintenance corridors and service areas that didn't appear on any of the facility standard maps. That night, As the facility settled into its quiet overnight routine, Zara activated the hidden communicator disguised as a child's toy. "This is Little Bird," she whispered, using the code name the extraction team had assigned her. "I'm in position and ready to proceed." "Copy, Little Bird," came the immediate response from Captain Santos. "Extraction team is standing by." "What's your status?"